right, well, good morning. We're going to begin. I have been threatened with electric shock therapy if I run over. So we're going to get started on time. Let me just take a brief moment to introduce myself. My name is Phil Rogers. I'm a circuit court judge from the 13th Circuit Court. Been on the bench 22 years. Have absolutely no technical background whatsoever. Not even quite sure what the cloud is. But I do have a vision, and some people believe I have strong leadership skills. So I think that's how we've ended up down here. Before I go further and discuss how we have envisioned and implemented and have made progress towards a truly fully digital paperless court, I think it'd be good to put the remarks into some context. I'm from northwestern Michigan. The three counties are Antrim, Leelanau, and Grand Traverse. You would probably think of them as Shanty Creek, the Homestead, and the Grand Traverse Resort. It is not true that when you go up there on vacation, you necessarily go home on probation. So we do want to encourage you to come up and visit. But that's the background, that's the area. It's northwestern Michigan. It's non-urban. We had about 140,000 people in those three counties combined in the last census. And for 2 decades in a row, we've undergone double-digit population growth, of which we're somewhat proud in a state that's had a net outflow of people. Our budget's relatively modest compared to the urban counties. It's $1.7 million. We're talking about basically a 2-judge circuit court, 3 family division judges, 2 referees. So that's essentially what the nature of the project is that we're involved with. What we thought we could do was create a digital paperless environment. And we began this project a number of years ago with the notion that we would begin small, see how it worked, and branched out from there. We wanted to receive and manage digital documents. We did not ever get into this because we cared about our carbon footprint. We're from northern Michigan, we should care about our carbon footprint, but honestly, Judge Power and I, we're just not that kind of guy. What we did want to do was improve efficiency. We did not want to get into a project like your classic hybrid where the premium you pay for the car doesn't cost justify on the fuel savings. These are public dollars. We wanted to spend them in a responsible way. And the notion was we needed to increase efficiency, we needed to increase transparency, and we wanted to have a system in place that people could understand and use effectively and be proud of. Efficiency, in our view, was the ability ultimately to have 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week filing. In the limited case codes we've now started with, we've accomplished that. We're a 3-county court. I don't know how many of you come from that kind of background, but you're talking about trying to manage files that are kept physically in 3 distinct geographic locations. We wanted to create useful tabbed indexed files. My background before I became a judge was a litigator. I came to court with a file that was tabbed, indexed, and useful. I can't think of anything more useless as a judge than a county clerk's file. It is this chronological mass of paper that grows exponentially over time in which you can't find anything. Within 6 months on the job, I was convinced I would either die of carpal tunnel thumb or I had to abandon it. And I did. And all judges do. Most judges in this state work off the paper judges' copies the lawyers are required to send them. And we ignore the court file. It's there, these beautiful stacked masses of paper on every motion day, but they're essentially useless. And we wanted to be able to e-sign and e-distribute orders. The cost savings are from a variety of sources. The easy stuff, paper files, done with them. In Grand Traverse County, we have these 2 large mechanical vertical file storage devices. They have maintenance agreements. They break down. They will be obsolete in a couple of years. Paper, envelopes, postage, toner, depreciation on copy machines, maintenance agreements are all tangible cost savings. And human labor. And human labor is there last, even though it is one of the most significant cost savings, because I will tell you, if you want to sell one of these projects in your county, advising the clerks that they aren't going to need less people, and advising your staff that we're going to have less people, it's not the best selling point. It's not the way you get the project implemented. But it is a reality, and you do save money. The transparency is incredible. It's not only a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week database that's available, currently accessible to lawyers and to the court, ultimately accessible to litigants and the public, and there's going to be a lot more discussion about that database and how it's going to become accessible. You know, it's a database that's created locally. All of your courts are essentially locally funded. but we're managed by the state, and there are some legitimate concerns that I think everybody has at the local level as well as the state level with regard to data mining, improper use of these databases, access to personal information, confidentiality issues. So while it will ultimately be in some fashion accessible to the public, the real value currently is it's accessible to the people who need to use it, the lawyers and the courts. We're not chasing around 3 counties searching for files any longer. Our current method of storage of retired documents is microfilm and microfiche. I worked all 3 years in the law library when I was a student. I'd never found that stuff useful. It's hard to work with. It's awful, but it's what we use. I believe that that's going to be obsolete hopefully this year. I think most of you may be familiar that the Supreme Court is considering some amendments to the court rules. Those amendments deal with electronics issues. The window, I think, for comment closed in April. It's been extended to September. I'm not sure of any real good reason why those wouldn't be amended. And I think ultimately, and very soon, the mechanism of storage is going to be digital. It'll be accessible. The word searchable. Be able to actually use the information. And we're encouraging our clerk just to sit on documents and not put them on microfilm currently. There are obstacles. There's no question about it. Courts are the epitome of tradition. Nobody likes change. Lawyers don't like change. Honestly, judges don't like change. There's a fear of it. There's a resistance to the initial costs. And it's not something where you're in a position to lord over other people. There are key players involved in a project of this complexity over which no judge has any control. County commissions, clerks are the 2 big ones. So it's important in the implementation phase to build support. And I really was listening with great attention to Mr. Bertolini, because everything he said I can echo. If you don't have sound support, if you don't build that support at the front end, don't even ask for the funding. Once you have support, once you've developed broad-based support, and then you get the funding, obviously you need a dependable vendor, and you have to provide consistent leadership. As these projects unfold, it is not kumbaya. We don't all sit around in a circle and sing together. We watch secretaries pull out their hair and county commissioners swear and all sorts of wonderful, exciting things. From a political point of view, and we are government, we have to be conscious of politics. Our program couldn't be much more complicated than it was. We're 3 counties. That's 3 county clerks, 3 county commissions, 3 county IT departments, the local bar association, our own staff, and a partridge in a pear tree. All had to be on board. And we worked at that at the front end. Judge Power and I went to the county clerks. We explained what we wanted to do. We looked at budget projections. What kind of revenue would be generated on the e-file side? What was it going to cost to put a document management system in? What are realistic amortization periods for this? What kind of revenue streams are we going to generate? How much money are we really going to need at the front end of this? We have a cost-sharing agreement. We went to the county IT departments. You can't do a program like this unless you're willing to lock arms and work hand in hand with the IT department. The principal one for us is in Grand Traverse County. They're wonderful. We worked with them well for years. We had great confidence in them. We went to the Bar Association to let them know what we had in mind. They're very supportive, and of course was our own staff. You can't receive things from the outside world through the firewall today in the courts without the permission of the Supreme Court. So you need a local administrative order. And the beauty of the local administrative order is twofold. It allows you to make your project mandatory, and trust me, lawyers do not like change. Anybody here from Ottawa County? How's your system going? So if it's not mandatory, people don't use it. And it's not antipathy. It's not even the $8. It's, I want to do today what I did yesterday. This brief has to go out. Just do it the way we always do it. Don't figure out this other thing. So unless you force people into that change, it's just not going to happen. And it allows the clerk to eliminate the paper file. Huge cost savings. There are lots of good reasons why you might want to implement the document management side of this inside of your firewall without receiving e-file documents. And that's what we started with. There really is no good reason, none, to allow people to e-file into your court if you can't handle the PDFs. If what you're going to then do is have the county clerk stand in front of the copy machine and use taxpayers' paper and toner to create the paper copies that used to come from the lawyers, that's just insanity. And we don't recommend insanity. There are three big components, I think, to a digital court. That's the way we've looked at it. All the stuff inside the firewall. We broke that down into the front of the court, and then basically the rest of the court, circuit court administration. There's the external e-file component, where things are coming to you from the outside world that have to pass through your firewall and then be handled digitally. And we've broken that down into components as well. We began with general civil. The next phase we would move to is the domestic relations area and criminal. And the last component isn't something that, honestly, I really thought about at the time, but it's a huge component to make this ultimately successful if it's truly going to be a digital paperless court. And that's the component at the bench. I mean, it's one thing for me to do the things that I can do in chambers that I'm real excited about. It's quite another thing if you've been used to dealing with paper, sitting out on the bench on a busy motion day, a room full of lawyers, and trying now to manage that docket digitally. There's some hardware configurations that need to be carefully thought out and some workflow issues, and we're still experimenting with that. Implementation, of course, has to be phased for all the logical reasons. Nothing ever works the way you think it will the first time, and it's silly to expect it to. It just doesn't. And you're changing human behavior. And I think that's a component that really shouldn't be overlooked. You're talking to staff, people that are used to doing their job in a certain way, and now you're asking them really to do it in quite a dramatically different fashion. And there's an emotional response to that. There just is. Some people are excited about it, they're energized by it, some people are afraid of it, some people just, it's stress, and they become very upset. And you need, I think, to be supportive of staff, to make sure they have adequate training, to work with them carefully, and then to do this in a measured way so that no one feels overwhelmed or intimidated by the project. We began with the front of the court, and it just happened that that's where we chose to be. It's a crystallized, compounded area, and we had two basic goals we were trying to do at that point. We had a room full of those private, non-public front of the court files, thousands of them. I mean, the kids stay in the system until they're 19. The lawyers are long gone, but the files stay around for years and years. And we wanted those things to be scanned and put onto a database, and we wanted a way to more seamlessly move the workflow through the system. You know, case managers, case assistants, front of the court, referees, judges, the administrative people, and to have access both to the internal files and to be able to move reports and recommendations and orders around. And ultimately, we now e-sign our orders. There were some benefits that we honestly didn't think about. I mean, I'll be blunt about that. These were unintended benefits that we discovered with hindsight. We were involving the clerks early on in a much more limited, non-threatening fashion, and they were very supportive. We were undergoing a major renovation of our courthouse, and the files had to be moved anyway. And the motivation I provided our friend of the court was either find a way to do this, or I'm going to put him in the parking lot and set him on fire. And she knows me. I think she believed me. She should have believed me. The goal was to not return those files, to make this project happen, to put a time limit on it. Let's do this. Let's get it done. Let's get the building finished, and when we move back, we're going to have this beautiful, and we have it today, video conference facility where the file used to be. Funding wasn't an issue. This wasn't a hugely expensive component. We had funds in the front of the court for that purpose. And I think most importantly, she's not here today, but I would really like to recognize her. Our friend of the court was enthused about this project. She ramrodded the project. She's a lawyer. She has lots of good management experience. She wanted to see it happen, and boy, is that key. When you're working with people who don't want to see a project happen, it's a nightmare, and we didn't have to go through that. So we're at the point now we had to pick a vendor. I think now you can see, and you've been involved in government long enough to understand that when you've built up a store of goodwill, when you have worked with people, when you have them at the point where they trust you and you trust them and you've gone to them and you want to make this project happen and it's transformative, I've described it before as literally as important as going from papyrus from the clay tablets. I mean, it's that big a deal in terms of processing information and having it be accessible. You go through all that process, you lay all that spade work, and you pick a bad vendor, you are screwed. You're done. I mean, you get the one chance in your career to do something like this. Your reputation is shot, nobody trusts you, they got 100 reasons to make excuses. Vendors need to be competent. There are competent vendors out there, but they need to be dependable. They need to be there when you call them. And I've heard complaints about lots of vendors, not just IT vendors. But yeah, that's a great product. You never get a hold of them. They don't respond. They don't help. They need to have a high-quality product, and they certainly need to be cost-effective. So we drafted that RFP initially in the friend of the court side. Of course, we involved county IT. They had to be involved in the technical side of that. And we involved our main funding unit administrator and, of course, the commissions. I'll be honest, I had no prior experience with ImageSoft or OnBase. I could have cared less who the vendor was as long as they could do the job. But our county administrator in Grand Traverse and our county IT did have prior positive experience with ImageSoft, with the OnBase system. They accepted it. We accepted their recommendation on faith. And then we began to do two things concurrently. We had to digitally map the workflow within the office, and we had to do something with those thousands of files. Those files needed to be culled, and the people that culled them were the case managers and case assistants responsible for them. They had a checklist. They got rid of everything they could get rid of, and it was shredded. Everything we really needed to keep, we kept, and we had a third-party vendor scan those in. If there's one point that I have to make here, and I'll make it again later, you have to spend the time to do the digital mapping and do it correctly. And it's not a simple transformation of what am I doing in the paper world to the computer world. It is that, once in a generation opportunity to actually sit down and say, why do we do this? Why do we do it this way? Is there a better way to do it? It's an opportunity for change. It's an opportunity to build new efficiencies into the system. So the digital mapping thing is a wonderful process. It's frustrating for the staff because now they're actually thinking about things they do intuitively. Well, when this case code comes in, where does it go? What do I do with it? And to literally go through that step by step and then to memorialize it in code. The old saying in computers is garbage in is garbage out. And that's true. You do a slipshod job of mapping, and this thing will be a nightmare for you for years. The friend of the court may be small. It may be a subset of what we do in circuit court. But it's full of forms, reports, orders, case codes, and all that staff interaction. Case assistants, case managers, referees, judges, circuit court administration, scheduling, lawyers. All of that has to be mapped. And if you spend the time and you do it right, you get an amazing product at the other end. But it won't be perfect initially. Now here is where the IT people and I part company. They want to test everything forever. I'm a bite the bullet, go live guy. Volume tells you where your problems are, not these cute little tests they do. See, that princess of OnBase in Grand Traverse County is back there laughing at me. Volume discloses problems. Don't be a coward. Turn it on. What's the worst that can happen? You lose your job? I'm only up every 6 years. It wasn't a problem. But one thing you do need to keep in mind, we really didn't so much. We had a contingency, but I would tell people who get involved now, know that you're going to want changes. Know that you're going to end up doing some out-of-budget items, some things you didn't contract for, some enhancements, some upgrades, things you want, and try to build that into your budget to begin with. Because you don't know what they are when you start, but you're going to discover them as you get into it. What we came out with was we had such a successful project with a friend of the court. I mean, it was so successful that even today, where we're required to maintain paper files, we scan everything in the world of divorce. We keep those paper files because guys like Chad Schmucker like us to keep paper files. We don't use them. It's all digital. It's wonderful. It's amazing. 3-county operation is all accessible on the computer. Our county IT was always a partner, and the success of the Friend of the Court project was the foundation upon which the 3 county clerks and the 3 county commissions we based support for what we wanted to do next, which was all of circuit court administration, and then bring in the e-file documents from the outside world. As we went along here, we were working well. Don Sheehan, who's also here, who is our IT director in Grand Traverse County, we worked together to develop a written communication policy that the state wanted us to have. We ultimately put one together that was accepted not only in our court, but in the probate court, the district court, and all 3 counties. They all accepted it. And we decided, the bar needs to understand we're moving towards a digital environment, so let's condition them to that. We sent them all communication and said, look, we don't want to communicate with you anymore by mail. We don't want any more paper judges' copies. Here's the deal. You send us PDFs of the judges' copies for motion day, and we will send you digital copies of notices of hearing, scheduling orders, decisions, and the like. We still file the original paper copies that we're required to by court rule with the clerks, but all the communication, we started this 3 or 4 years ago, with the bar is by email. Our listserv isn't huge by urban standards, but for I think the area where we live, we have about 800 people that we have on on a listserv that we regularly litigate with, that we communicate with by email. One attorney in an email, I love this, said she didn't want us to communicate with her by email. And Chad's known me for a long time, our state court administrator. Judge Parr and I have a general solution to that sort of opposition. We just ignore it, rolled over her, and moved on. Because you can't let one person drive a system. I mean, systems are about organization. It's about simplifying things. It's about making things good for everyone. And she doesn't come to court anyway. With regard to the outside issues, we knew that if we were going to receive e-files, that we had to have approval to do that. And we went to Chad's predecessor and said, look, we'd like to do this. We're a multi-county court. We're not urban. We think we offer something different in the mix here. We got some tentative support, so we went back to the Bar Association, told them what they wanted, what we wanted to do. They were enthused. I mean, lawyers are way ahead of us on this, way ahead of us. The sophisticated lawyers have been working in an e-file format with the Court of Appeals, with the United States Bankruptcy Court, with the United States District Courts. Some of them up north do visit in Oakland County, and they've been using that system. They're ready for it. They communicate with each other by email. This is not an issue where the courts are showing leadership. I've always felt, at least in my approach to the bar, that we're catching up. So they were good to go. We submitted and received our local administrative order. We drafted an RFP with the assistance of county IT. And when we got to vendor selection, again, we brought everyone back in. Clerks, IT department from the 3 counties, counties administration, commissions. We wanted everybody to be on board in the selection of a vendor. And we did make a unanimous selection. Why ImageSoft? Well, for us, at that point in time, they had an established history of both reliability and responsiveness. They're dependable. When we call them on the phone, they answer, they show up. Most importantly, from my point of view, as a truly non-technical guy, who I had someone explain to me what the stupid cloud thing was, they understand that overlay between the practical reality of the job we do in court and the digital world. It isn't as though the nerd herd showed up, with some off-the-shelf database program and said, okay, here you go, fire her up. They worked with us in this digital mapping process to put together a project that allows us to do our job. Exactly what our first speaker was talking about. Do your job. Be more efficient. Make your tax dollars go farther. Help people out. And the product was high quality. Those are good qualitative reasons why we selected that particular vendor. But there was also a quantitative reason, an excellent quantitative reason. They were the low bid. Unlike their principal competitor, they weren't charging us to program through that county firewall to connect the TrueFile system with the database management system. And that was a serious number their competitors had put on that. Their competitor, their most serious competitor, would not share $1 with us ever on the e-file revenue. None. And I know what kind of money you people in Oakland County are getting. I absolutely know. ImageSoft was willing to share revenue with us on a first dollar basis. And while it's not dispositive, while it's not the primary factor, while it's not the sole reason why you should ever pick any company in government for anything, they're Michigan-based. And I agree with what Mr. Bertolli just said. I am sick to death of listening to government officials talking about going from Rust Belt to Tech Belt and not putting their money where their mouth is. I mean, we spend in this state, we have spent millions of dollars getting that god-awful MICE system programmed somewhere in the third world. It wasn't even in America. I come from an economics background, and in economics you learn something about the balance of payments, and when money flows out, it's not getting respent in your own area, and it creates an economic depressive effect within any country whose balance of payments are. The same thing happens at a local level, the same thing happens at a state level. What I've liked about the folks I've worked with here, they're not only Michigan-based, the people I work with were educated here. Shocking as this may seem, we have some amazing universities. We have some incredibly talented people that come out of those universities. And I'm at the age where my kids, I have 4, are all in their 20s and are all headed somewhere else because there aren't the opportunities in Michigan that there are other places. And I hate seeing those kids and their highly talented friends in New York and Chicago and San Diego and the other places they've been, Atlanta, that they've ended up because of lack of opportunities here. And I think where we can, as government, we have an obligation to spend our money in our own state. All right, this is our timeline to give you an indication. This isn't a rush to a paperless court. It's an orderly, measured process. The IT people think I'm in a rush to a paperless court. We actually applied for the LAO in January of 2010. We had a couple of years of experience with a friend of the court system at that point. We thought this was a doable project. We'd received that tentative indication that it would be favorably approved. We received it in April. That gap between April and September of 2010, it didn't take 5 months to draft an RFP, but this is about being cooperative. Our IT department was swamped at the time with other projects they were doing. They asked us to push it back a few months, so we did. Everybody gets along. And by September of 10, that RFP went out. And then you know how that process works. I don't need to tell you that. You meet with vendors, you ask questions, you have an informative period. Ultimately, of the 3 entities that chose to respond, we had formal presentations made by each of them twice to the committee that was put together, this broadly representative committee. And then we had our vendor selection finalized in January of 2011. We got right into digital mapping in the spring and summer of 2011. We were testing and training staff in the fall of 2011, and concurrently, we had gathered together a group of local attorneys who were willing to be trained and to test the TrueFile program that was going to be coming in from the outside world. By November of 2011, over some objection, the bullet was bit, and we went live, and it's been great. I know we had some problems early on, but they've been fixed, and things are going fine. And in mid-January of 12, we turned on the TrueFile tap and have been receiving documents for the attorneys. And that's been going well as well. So the critical points I would have here, you can't spend too much time and effort mapping the workflow. You absolutely can't. Take the time, do it well, do it right. Budget for enhancements. You are going to want some improvements, some changes, some things you didn't think about. They're out of contract, so have some money for that. And you've got to support your staff and the attorneys. You know, we spent a lot of time and energy training our own staff. We've put time and energy into training attorneys and their staff. We did a couple of live training sessions that ImageSoft put on. Our website supports them with a frequently asked set of questions, a training manual. The live training sessions were put into a video. Those are on the website as well. Our staff answer questions. Our county IT people answer questions. And ImageSoft has made themselves available. The 2 small counties, Leelanau and Antrim, have a lot of public space and lower volume, and they tend to deal with issues right at the desk. In Grand Traverse County, we were fortunate to have some extra space, and we've actually created a public area. We put in a computer, a printer, a scanner, the clerk goes down there that helps people. You can pay things by credit card. You can participate in e-filing. And we have strong clerk commitment to help the public. And the wonderful thing about these filing queues, these documents that come in queues, if you're really not interested, if you really want to be kind of a clerk and blow this thing off and look at it at the end of the day, that's not what's happening. Those queues are being worked all day long. A document comes in, it's provisionally approved or immediately rejected, and you're told why. It then gets passed along for credit card approval, and assuming the credit card's approved, then it's finally accepted. It's immediately e-served on all the parties of record. We do credit card sweeps every 20 minutes. The reality in Grand Traverse County, where we have the highest volume, is that you e-file something, and the clerks are now looking at it during normal business hours. A long time to get it accepted and approved would be 25 minutes. I mean, it's really moving along. I watch this when I'm working the queue in my chambers, when I'm looking at the stuff that's under review, the things that are in my inbox, and stuff's popping out of that review queue constantly. And I think that's really been a great benefit. The lawyers see that they're getting some instantaneous response. I mean, if they have a stipulated order and it's not something that's objectionable, it's being received by the clerk. If I'm not in a trial and I'm in my chambers, that can be turned around maybe in 15 minutes. It's an amazing increase of efficiency. Of course, the phase implementation is just to benefit everybody. The clerk, this came from her, I know it's an old phrase, but the Grand Traverse clerk made it really crystal clear that she wanted this as a garden hose, not as a fire hose. She didn't want to be overwhelmed with digital documents in a new system, and that seemed fair, so that's what we did. We began with civil and negligence case codes for a couple of reasons. I think there's one other court that actually began with divorce. I, for a couple of reasons, wouldn't recommend that. And it's really why civil and negligence is a better place to start. The attorneys are more sophisticated. They're already e-filing. They're already doing it in federal court. This is not new or novel to them. You have a very limited number of pro-per parties that actually participate. We got a lot of mortgage foreclosures up north. We're no different than down here, but the people don't tend to participate. They get defaulted. And it's an excellent revenue source. It just is. Our next phase will go to the rest of the general civil case codes, which isn't much, just the A's and the P's. We're going to begin domestic relations just with the divorces without kids. It's simpler. Those are very small files. There's not a lot of activity normally in any given one. Once we're satisfied that's working well, then we would take up the rest of domestic relations and deal with the confidentiality issues that you have in divorces with kids. And we'll do criminal last. And honestly, the only reason we're doing criminal last is there's no revenue. They're indigents. The prosecutor, we have an agreement, right? The prosecutor, it's just the county's money chasing itself around in a circle, and the indigent attorneys, and it makes no sense. It makes a lot of sense to have that database managed digitally, but it's not a revenue source. We are a 3-county court, and we have always had, for more than 20 years, a written operating agreement that controls how we budget for things. And that was helpful because that we used for this as well. For example, if Antrim County last year was 14% of the caseload, then in 2012 they pay 14% of the 2012 budget. It's a trailing year caseload. That's how we've done it for years. There's some nuances to that really aren't relevant to this, but that's how the costs were shared. And because each county is always quite jealous of its independence, the revenues from this go directly, not to us, they go directly to the treasurer of the relevant county. And they get daily and monthly reports from ImageSoft. The fees come from the state court administrator's office. I mean, they want statewide consistency. That's a perfectly legitimate demand. The only variation we did, Oakland County kind of pioneered this. They charged $5 to e-file and $3 to e-serve. And I was told by some people that were involved with that, well, you know, really that was just to kind of soften it for the attorneys. There's really no good reason not to concurrently e-file. And in fact, there's a lot of mischief that can be done if you don't make attorneys concurrently e-file. So we just put the two together and charge $8 for a bundle. Our definition of this bundle, it's what was in the envelope. You file your bundle, you pay the $8, we accept it as long as you file it properly, and it goes into the Register of Actions. We have made a conscious effort, and this is really advice we got from the State Court Administrator's Office over the years. Do not let the county believe that they've now found the promised land and the milk and honey are flowing in through e-file revenue. A, in a smaller jurisdiction, it's not that much. And B, it is not a substitute for general fund support. It just isn't. What it can be is an excellent source of funds to support your hardware, software, tech support, licenses, upgrades, that sort of thing. The project does save labor, but again, that is just not a selling point with the clerks or the court staff. And let me talk a little bit about the revenues on this, which I've never really done with others before, but I think you might be interested in this given what the Oakland County Administrator was talking about with regard to projects, funding, and selling them. We did not get into this project to raise money. Absolutely not. That's not the role of the court, that's not the role of government, despite what some current philosophical thought may be. The role of government is not to generate money. That's what capitalist enterprises do, is to provide services to people. That is not to say that government should be irresponsible in the way that it provides its services. So, all right, we took a look at this project. We knew that there were costs to put the document management system in place, and revenue could be derived from e-filing, and that there would be some efficiency savings associated with that. We were very careful with the 3 county commissions not to underestimate costs or to overstate revenue. And the analysis that we provided to them was this looked to us that realistically it had a 5-year amortization. It's actually far better than that. The commitment we made and the way we dealt with the labor issue was as we started into this project, the second phase of this, the court administration and e-filing, we had a person retire out of our administrative office. We made a commitment not to fill that spot. And that was difficult. We had to pay some overtime. There was a lot of stress. You know, this isn't just the same day. This is the same day. Now I'm trying to change to do something else. So it's a tough period. But we made that commitment not to fill that spot, and now we don't need to. And that, wages and benefits, was $50,000 a year, round numbers. We are generating on 2 case codes, just 2 case codes, in these 3 counties, in a non-urban court in northwestern Michigan. It looks to me like from the projections that I'm seeing, we'll probably $33,000, $35,000 this year. You know, nothing to write home to mom about, except our total investment in this, beginning with a friend of the court several years ago, through today and some extra work we've contracted for, round numbers, $220,000. You go out and buy a bond today for 15%. Where are you going to buy that? You can't get a 15% rate of return on anything. On anything. If you want to add in the $50,000 we're saving per year on just one staff person, that's assuming the clerks in the 3 counties never have to eliminate a staff position. This project amortizes in about 3 years, not 5. And the rate of return on it's about 40% per year. That, again, though, is not why we did the program. It wasn't about eliminating people. It was about transparency, it was about efficiency, it was about productivity. But that's the math on it. That's just how it works. So it is, I think, a program that we're quite proud of it. I got great people. And the reason I didn't thank them at the front end is because I wanted you to know what we did before I thanked them. I mean, my court administrator and deputy court administrator are here, Harry Quinn and Julie Ahrens. They've been essential. They put the hair back in the heads of the staff, you know, as they're pulling it out. And, you know, we have Linda McGuire back there, our Princess of On Base, and Don Sheehan, who runs County IT, and Sherry Nito, I think, is here from Leelanau County Clerk's office. Everybody has worked together well. Everybody has accepted the fact that this is a team project, and we're all in this together because we built that support initially. This was never a project that we intended to or believe we have rammed down anyone's throat, which is probably why we've had much more success implementing this than, quite frankly, Chad's predecessor did, jamming the MICES program down everybody's throats statewide. So what I'd like to do at this point, if you have some questions, I'd like to take some questions. Yes, sir.
Judge, first of all, I'd like to thank you. I appreciate and value your input. In fact, I have to tell you, it's the first time I've ever walked into a room and the judge was standing. Anyway, did you have a 3-county IT department when you did
No.
this?
No.
So you had to put 3 IT departments together.
We had to create trusted, so-called, you know what those are, I didn't. We had to create trusted sites in Antrim and Leelanau, so it was as though you were sitting in Traverse City when you're accessing a computer. And in Antrim County, we had bandwidth issues as well. Because it turns out Bel Air isn't on the way to anywhere. And government doesn't like to share, so this fiber optic line that goes by them that's available to the schools wasn't available to the county. It's insanity, what we've dealt with.
The other, just a quick question. I'm a county commissioner up north, and we're elected for 2-year terms, and it's kind of hard to implement, a 5-year plan, let's say, because this stuff is not cheap. I agree with the overall principle of it, but do you have any words of wisdom on that?
Well, I'll tell you, we started with the friend of the court, and I believe our initial investment just to do the internal database management with the friend of the court was around $48,000. And there are funds within the friend of the court that you can cost justify, and there's a lot of federal reimbursement money. So the actual cost to the county to do most friend of the court projects is substantially less than the nominal cost because you're getting reimbursed by the federal government as long as it's child related. So we had, and then that I think was as I've said, built the base for support to get the commissions and the clerks then to say, all right, let's look at this as a broader project. And then you're looking at revenues. And that's what I'm saying. I mean, if we can generate, as we are on pace to do, say $35,000 this year, they've invested $220,000, including that original 48. And we've eliminated a staff position. This thing pays for itself in 3 years. I mean, it absolutely just pays for itself. And I think most people, if you analogize it to buying a car, you buy a car over 36 months. Well, you're buying a state-of-the-art document management system and an e-file program for the entire circuit court, including the family division, and you can pay for it in 3 years. But you do have to put some money in up front. Absolutely you do.
Thank you.
And, I was stunned, not surprised that Oakland County's losing IT people. They're down 21%. Grand Traverse County's down substantially. As a commissioner, I can't think of anything more vital to the operation of county government than its IT department. We're all becoming creatures of computers. We're all becoming digital. It's politics. And you say you're going to get rid of the extension service, and the ladies show up that want to be told how to can peaches, and the politicians all bleed all over them. But the reality is, you need IT people. It's just, how it works. And we've had great success with our folks, but they're getting spread thin too, because these projects are like a cold. Once somebody gets it, everybody gets it. Well, now our district court wants to put this program. The finance department of Grand Traverse County has it. The city of Traverse City is implementing OnBase in its clerks system because it works. It's good. It's good stuff. But that stretches staff pretty thin. Yes, ma'am.
How do you get a judge that, it sounds to me from what you're saying, it kind of came from you down, you really were into this. How do you get it to go the other way and get a judge that's so fearful of it?
I have a colleague whom I enable on a number of other things. Quid pro quo. And he's been good. He's been good. He hasn't thrown a mouse in 2 or 3 years. He threatens to, but he's never actually thrown his laptop out the window. And he's gotten into it now. He actually now yesterday afternoon when I got here, I opened up my laptop and cleaned up my queue. I signed the things that needed to be signed. I read the things that needed to be read. And I can do everything. And he now sees he can do everything in the digital world he can do in the paper world. We highlight, we put on overlay text, we do markups, we change things we don't like in proposed orders. We e-sign. I have worked that queue from 2 foreign countries and 3 different states. And now the Fairfield and Livonia. And it's a great thing. You can. There's nothing worse, I think, than coming back from a vacation to look at 350 emails. I mean, you want to keep up on these things, and I prefer to do my work rather than have somebody else do it for me. So yeah, he wasn't the guy who wanted to make this happen, but he's supportive. He's happy about it. He's become involved. And I think that's a big part. That's why we haven't just implemented some solution out of the bench. If we can come up with a solution that he and I both like, I'm pretty confident any judge in the state of Michigan will like it.
Now, do you use it from the bench? And how?
Not yet.
Okay.
I in my chambers, yes. I do everything in there. Yeah, I do. We do. The other thing that really works well is you need 2 screens. It just makes it easier to use. It just, you're signing stuff. Well, I sign stuff on my left and I read stuff on my right, and you can move it back and forth, and that's really wonderful. And he does that too. And he's been good about working with the staff, and we have such a good relationship with our staff. One of the women finally told him one day, she said, "Judge Power, you're really not that dumb." And he kind of put his head and goes, "I know." So yeah, but that's part of the collegiality of it. He and I go back and forth on being chief judge. He's currently chief judge because I really don't care about it anymore. But it's never meant anything. We're a 2-judge court. I mean, down here, that's kind of a big deal. I mean, people walk around with epaulets and put stripes on their robe. It just doesn't matter to us. We've always done everything as a team. We've been together. I've been on the bench 22 years. He's been there 20. And we've always done everything together. So that was never really going to be an issue. But I see where it could be other places. Oakland? Ottawa? Well, the rumors I hear about Ottawa is you got a great program, but you need somebody to step up and say it's mandatory. And honestly, there's a state RFP that is being reviewed right now. And I'll tell you, the big, giant, gaping hole in it, and Mr. Schmucker knows that, it's non-mandatory. It's insane. It's insane. I mean, if you're going to put these programs in place, if you're going to create document management systems statewide, and you're going to have lawyers e-file, why would you have these bastardized systems where half the file's paper and half of it's digital? Or why would you have a county clerk standing there copying at a copy machine? It doesn't make any sense. I mean, it's either got to be mandatory or don't do it. I mean, if I was a judge and I was told those are my 2 options, it's either mandatory or I'm not going to do it. Otherwise, it's that, that tool you had to have. This is maybe more for the guys. You just had to have, I don't know, that reciprocating saw, and you used it once and it sits on the shelf and you never used it again. That's kind of cool if it's your own money. It's not cool when it's public money. Other questions? Chad?
Do you see any different issues for probate or district court?
Confidentiality issues. But in terms of the way you implement it, for example, the estates and trust side of probate court, as soon as the probate judges tell us they'd like to get involved, we'd be delighted to help them. And I don't think that would be hard to implement those case codes. Of course, the family division, they are using that system. It's in place for them. But with the minors, what I love about the federal system is they've got a way in which, when you go in and you look at the like the TrueFile version of the federal system, the on-base version, you will see certain items that have a padlock beside them. Those are secure. They can only be opened by people who are pre-approved to open them. The public can't open them. Other lawyers can't open them. So we're very sensitive to those security issues, and we want to move forward carefully and make sure that those are addressed. But absolutely they can do this. Yes, ma'am.
How do you handle pro-per?
Well, that's why we haven't gone to DO yet. That's the next segment. The boys have promised me pro-per filing by 4 days ago. Pro-per filing, in the non-technical view of someone who isn't overwhelmed by knowledge, is a one-person law firm that doesn't have any staff. It's the old recorder's court attorney that practiced out of the breast pocket, the pleaders and waivers. It's a one-person law firm. But we need to be able, I don't want to go forward with the DOs until we can handle pro-pers. In my part of the world, and I think it's probably pretty true everywhere, like 50% or more of that caseload is pro-per. And they are not indigent. They are absolutely capable of paying filing fees as well as the convenience fees associated with true filing. So we want that in place. We want it to be as simple as possible. And what we're prepared to do is say, look, go on your computer, sign up like a lawyer would, file your stuff. If that's too complicated for you, come down to the clerk's office, and for a modest fee, in addition to the $8, we'll scan it for you. We're, for us, because we've already, we're already scanning all the divorce in. Now, this wouldn't necessarily be true for other people. Whatever we get that's e-filed is less work for the clerks that they're already doing, plus it has a marginal revenue stream associated with it, so it's all good. It's all good for us. And if we charge them something nominal to scan things in for them, fine. And if they're indigent, then we can charge them. But yeah, we need that piece, guys, because I'm not going to send a letter to Mr. Schmucker until we have it. Even though the state RFP pushed pro-pers off into the distant future. I read it. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You talk paperless files, paperless everything, paperless offices. I'm under the impression that friend of the court has to keep their paper files for 10 years. After
The clerk's files. The public files.
yes.
What I'm talking about were the non-public files.
Okay, difference being?
Think of if you were in juvenile court. There's a case file for the juvenile that's non-public, and the friend of the court, I think all friend of the court case managers have a non-public file for each of their divorce cases. Right. In it will be things like the divorce complaint and copies of the interim orders, letters back, and things that never get into the clerk's file. Exactly. Those are the things that we called and had scanned and made digitally accessible. On the other extreme, we are scanning the clerk's files into the system, but we've maintained the paper files until we get authority to do something different. Okay. Yeah, it's a good point, because there's a key distinction. I think a lot of people don't realize that in the juvenile system as well as in the friend of the court, there are usually two files. There's the public file, and then there's the internal private file. How am I doing?
We are just a few minutes over right now.
Oh, you didn't even get your taser out. I'm done.
It's very interesting.